Okay, welcome back. We're talking about contingency planning now. One of the things we used to do is whenever we had some slack time, which wasn't very often, we'd go grab the junior person and say, go to the warehouse, pull out an old server, set it on the floor in the server room, restore everything from backup, use all the instructions that we've given you, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay? And behind the scenes, we had a stopwatch. Okay? And so the first time the person did it, it probably took an hour for them to, get everything up and running. But the next time, it probably took 30 minutes. And then the time after that, it probably took 20 minutes. Okay? You see how, even something as an exercise can be measured. Okay. Risk management from Chapter 4. Risks change over time. Particularly if you're making some changes. Let's say, for example, I didn't have any work from home, or I didn't have any bring your own device, or I didn't have any wireless devices. Things change over time, or even just the landscape has changed. We weren't really paying attention to, ransomware, because we weren't really collecting anything that was all that important. But now we are, that kind of stuff. So it could be an awful lot of things. You can't just have one plan and one risk, your business impact analysis that you did 4 years ago. No, your BIA basically needs to be up to date. Certifications on page 451. So does the legal framework require you to have certified people? There's some that do. Some sort of an accreditation system, before you can, get the approval to operate your system, particularly if it's like a, top secret kind of a thing. Not only does your system have to have credentials, but your people also have to credentials. Some sort of, banking, healthcare have things like that. And then, the auditing requirement. If no one is looking about certifications, let me just give you an example. So I got a gazillion certifications. And I got a phone call one day from the university saying, hey, we're having trouble verifying your CompTIA certifications. Some of these are not made public. And I went, oh, okay, thank you. I forgot. So I went to the CompTIA website and, because you could say private. For some reason I did on some. I went back and, went public. And, so bottom line is they hired someone to go through and check to make sure I had the degrees that I said I had, and I had the certifications that I said I have. They didn't take my word for it. They checked it out. Yikes. Okay. The security acquisition. All right. This is basically, the build or buy thing. No one's going to build a, router by themselves or a firewall by themselves, right? That's dumb. That's not really what we're talking about. But we are talking about this whole life cycle thing. So some sort of a thing, I determine I need, and then I do an assessment, and then a solution, the implementation, an operation, and then maybe one of these days it gets closed out. This is nothing really new. It's just a different spin on the exact same thing we've seen before. Identify the viable solutions. What is the problem? Because if you can't describe the problem, any solution will do. What do you want me to do? I'm sorry. This one is what does success look like? And then over here, okay, what do I have to do that? And then I actually have to do it, and then I got to check to make sure it works. Okay, good. Okay, incident response. Now here's an interesting thing. You might think I've got this incident response thing down. I know exactly everything's monitored, but to tell you the truth, sometimes it's going to be your customers or your employees who are going to call up and say, something's funky, because they have the context. They know how long it's supposed to take when you push this button, right? Your own employees are going to say, hey, there's something going on in the database. I hit this button and it's taking a really long time. So you might have all sorts of monitoring systems in place, but your customers and your employees are really, really good sources for oops, something happened. The help desk might be another one. And this may be kind of simple stuff like, oh, I forgot my password, that kind of stuff. But it could be, hey, I'm having trouble here and I'm not sure what's going on. And so they might be able to escalate it back to the systems team and say, I've got 12 people all calling simultaneously telling me this system is down. So that would be a good source. And you want them to be a single point of contact. You don't want your customers, well, and to include your employees. To have to go dial 5 or 6 numbers, you want one single point of contact or one web page, one way of getting a hold of putting in a trouble ticket. It could be completely electronic on a web page, it could be a phone, whatever. But some sort of tracking ticketing system. By the way, people who do tech support for a living universally hate tracking systems, but because sometimes the metrics are used inappropriately. Like somebody will come in and say, you need to do 10 customer resolutions per day. It's like, well, some of them are longer than that, that kind of stuff. But anyway, the tracking and ticketing system, you need to have some way of knowing if tickets are going up or they're going down. I mean, how else could you justify going to your boss and say, we need 2 more help technicians? They go, oh yeah? And you say, well, the whole time is 20 minutes to get to talk to somebody on the phone. I mean, that's bad, that kind of stuff. Anyway, and they have to have specific training to determine if something is just a fault or a security issue. Now, I will tell you, this is tough. Let's just say you had a guard force, okay? And it was contracted out, and they noticed a door got propped open somewhere. So is that a physical security issue? Certainly. Is it a information security issue? Maybe. Maybe there ought to be some instructions about, sweep the building and, go here in this room and check this, that kind of stuff. But all in all, the help desk folks and maybe the guard force really need to be told, this is the threshold where you call someone else. Because it's not exactly clear and you don't really want to leave it to their judgment. Okay, configuration and change management, we've talked about this a lot. I basically have to have like an inventory of the current configurations. Now, in my world, I had a bunch of servers. And we had like a 3-ring binder that was sat in the server room. Printed copies of this stuff, but electronic copies elsewhere. That basically said, here's how the machine was set up. Here's how we petitioned the drives. Here's how we set up the RAIDs. Here's how we installed the software. Here's what options we used when we installed the software. I mean, it's detailed stuff. Here's all the accounts. Here's the access matrix. Here's all the accounts, and here's all the resources, and here's the thing in the middle. All that stuff, all documented. Great for auditing. But also, all the stuff in there, we also include the install media and the backup software and all the stuff in this little cool 3-ring binder. Okay. So the point is, when things change, like I add more disks, well, that disk partitioning stuff back in the original documentation needs to be changed. Again, nothing is concrete. Things happen, things change, and you're going to have to change your documentation. Maybe you very hastily put it together when you did the initial install. Oh yeah, we did this, this, and this. And so maybe afterwards you need to go through and kind of clean it up. So the bottom line is identify what the change is. So a change is coming. Evaluate the request, right? Oh, someone wants to make this change. Find out if their thing is going to affect anyone else. I mean, and the classic example I keep talking about is we're getting ready to change, some, I don't know, a time card system, where all the lawyers in the office have to account for their time and they charge their time against an account. Okay. But they're right smack dab in the middle of this huge case that's consuming the entire office. And I want to make a change to their system that they use for recording their time. And they're going, no, not now, okay? Wait a couple of weeks until this thing is over with. It's like, okay, I got it, right? So change management. You may be totally, you're an IT person. You may not be aware at all that the staff has been staying late and overtime's going crazy, and just because that's not what you do. And then you make a decision, and then you implement the thing and you monitor to make sure it works. Now, in most cases, during this change management, there's going to be a fallback plan. And the way it works is, the recovery time, the fallback plan and the recovery time has to go into this thing. So, for example, I came in the middle of the night. I started at midnight, and this thing has to be done by 6 o'clock in the morning when the employees show up. So I'm expecting to take it 2 hours. But if something goes wrong, and it's going to take me 1 hour to put the old one back in place, that means at 5 o'clock I have to stop. Yeah, see how the math works, right? I'm thinking it's only going to take 2 hours. I should be able to be out here at 2 a.m. But if not, if I have to struggle and struggle and struggle, I need to be looking at my watch going, wait a minute, wait a minute. We're getting to the point where the fallback plan won't be in place in time. And then, of course, monitoring to make sure you are successful. Okay. Page 470, they talk about the security maintenance model. And this is basically focusing on the maintaining part, right? All right, so here's the maintenance model. So, some sort of external monitoring and internal monitoring and risk assessment. We've done all this stuff. Vulnerability assessment. I have a database, and then I do a review. So basically what we're talking about is a way to keep track of all of the changes, because your risk posture may change. The number of threats may change. The risks may change. Let's say, for example, you had 2 servers that you were, your database. You had two servers for your database. And then one of them died. And you went, well, it's okay. We'll just run it on one database until we can, go to the capital improvement plan and buy another server. So it'll be a month or so before we can get back to having 2. Yeah, I think your risk assessment has changed. What do you think? Yeah, okay. So they start talking about external monitoring. So where do you get all this good stuff? Vendors, inform teams of product-related threats. CERT supplies something saying, hey, we've got a problem. Public interest, sites supply information and membership sites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just you, it's other people that are coming in there. And, like Microsoft. Microsoft could sit down and say, hey, we've discovered a vulnerability. You need to deal with it. It's like, that wasn't on your radar. It wasn't even your responsibility, but you need to be able to respond to these things. So vendors, CERT, public sources, membership sites. If you're on a mailing list, is a security mailing list is fantastic. I have some websites that I go to a lot. But let's keep going. So the next one is, the monitor, escalate, and respond. So you have to have a meaningful risk level associated with this, a summary of the external information and a detailed intelligence on whatever the highest risk is. And then, collect the data and store the stuff that you get. I mean, if I get an update, I need to be able to say I got it, right? I can't, right? Okay. So you don't just do it and go on about your business. You have to record it all. On this date, I pulled this. Here is the patch. I installed it. Don't throw the patch away. That kind of stuff. The next one is internal environment. So this is kind of sort of the same, but this is like your infrastructure has changed, or your activity for intrusion detection has changed, or I'm verifying that all the IP addresses and all that stuff, and which ones are coming from the inside, which ones are coming from the outside, and then change management and stuff. So there's a whole thing in there called network characteristics and inventory. I know it sounds a little funky. So I need an inventory of all of my equipment, all my IT hardware, all my software, how everything is configured on the PCs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm going to do a little demo here that basically is some software that I've been using for quite some time. So I'm going to go here and bring up this guy. And this is basically one of those inventory kind of software. I'm going to go ahead and just hit the little collect data button. It'll take us just a second. So I'm running it on my local machine, but in reality, you'd probably run this on all the machines in the entire organization and store the data in a database. So we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. We'll come back to this in just a second.